April 30th, 1945, was not just another day in history. It was the final heartbeat of the most destructive man the modern world has ever known. Above Berlin, the sky burned red as Soviet artillery erased the last symbols of Nazi power. Below that ruined city, buried under layers of concrete, Adolf Hitler waited for the end, not as a fearless leader, but as a trapped, broken man counting his final hours. The world often imagines dictators dying dramatically, on a battlefield, before a firing squad, or screaming defiance to the very end. But Hitler's final 24 hours were far more disturbing. They were silent, paranoid, claustrophobic, a slow collapse of a man who once believed himself chosen by destiny, now abandoned by reality. This is the story of those last 24 hours, hour by hour, inside the bunker, where absolute power ended in absolute fear. By late April 1945, Berlin was already a corpse pretending to breathe. Entire neighborhoods lay flattened. Smoke hung permanently in the air. Water, electricity, and hope were nearly gone. Soviet forces closed in from all sides, tightening the noose street by street. German soldiers defending the capital were barely soldiers at all. Elderly men and teenage boys armed with Panzerfausts, sent to face tanks in a battle already lost. Yet, inside the Führerbunker, Hitler still clung to fantasy. For weeks, he had refused evacuation offers. High-ranking officials begged him to flee south to the Alps. Planes waited. Escape routes were discussed. But Hitler rejected them all. Leaving Berlin would mean admitting defeat, and defeat, to him, was worse than death. The bunker itself had become a tomb long before anyone died inside it. 20 meters underground, the air smelled of sweat, oil, and damp concrete. Ventilation was poor. Hallways were narrow. Every explosion shook dust from the ceiling. There were no windows, only artificial light that made days blend into nights. People whispered, walked softly, and avoided speaking the truth out loud. Hitler lived in this underground world like a ghost haunting his own empire. Physically, he was a ruin. His hand trembled uncontrollably. His back was hunched. His face was gray, his eyes sunken. He mumbled. He shuffled instead of walking. The myth of the powerful Führer had long collapsed, but now even the illusion inside the bunker was fading. Still, he clung to maps. Every day, Hitler held military briefings. Officers pointed at positions that no longer existed. He ordered counterattacks by divisions that had been destroyed weeks earlier. When generals informed him that no relief army was coming, he erupted into rage. He screamed, he threatened. Then suddenly he would go silent, staring into nothing, as if trying to will reality into obedience. But reality no longer listened. On the evening of April 29th, something changed. The shouting stopped. The orders ceased. Hitler realized what he had spent years denying. The war was over and he had lost everything. That night, in one of the bunker's small rooms, Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun. She had been with him for years, always kept away from the public eye, hidden like a secret. Now at the end, she stood beside him as his wife for less than 40 hours. There was no joy in the ceremony, no laughter. Witnesses described it as cold, formal, almost mechanical. Hitler wore his old military jacket. Eva wore a dark dress. Papers were signed, hands were shaken, and it was done. Why marry now? Because Hitler wanted control over his final narrative. He wanted history to remember him as a man with loyalty, devotion, and sacrifice, anything but defeat. After the marriage, Hitler immediately dictated his last will and political testament. This document was not a confession. It was not an apology. It was blame turned into ink. He accused Jews of starting the war. He condemned disloyal generals. He spoke of betrayal, destiny, and struggle. Even facing death, he could not admit his own responsibility. Outside the bunker, Berlin's last defenders were being crushed. Soviet artillery fired relentlessly. Tanks rolled through streets lined with rubble and corpses. Civilians hid in basements, praying the shelling wouldn't land directly above them. The capital of the Third Reich was finished. Inside the bunker, Hitler prepared for suicide. Cyanide capsules were distributed. Guns were cleaned. Escape was no longer discussed. Hitler obsessed over one thing: his body. He feared being captured alive. He feared humiliation. He feared becoming a symbol of defeat. He remembered what partisans had done to Mussolini's corpse. That terror haunted him more than death itself. Earlier, he tested the cyanide pills on his German shepherd, Blondie. The dog collapsed within seconds. Witnesses said Hitler turned away, silent. It was one of the few moments where his emotional mask cracked, not out of compassion, but because it confirmed that there would be no escape from his chosen fate. April 30 began with the sound of explosions so close that the bunker shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. The Red Army was less than 500 meters away. Hitler ate his final meal, a simple vegetarian dish. He said little. His secretaries noticed how calm he suddenly appeared. This was not bravery, it was resignation. When fear reaches its peak, numbness takes over. One by one, people came to say, "Goodbye." Secretaries cried openly. Officers gave stiff Nazi salutes. Some promised loyalty even now. Others avoided eye contact, ashamed, relieved, or both. Hitler thanked them for their service. There were no speeches, no last orders, only the silent acknowledgement that the story was ending. Around 3:30 p.m., Hitler and Eva Braun walked into his private room and closed the door. Those outside waited. Minutes passed. Then came a dull sound, a gunshot. No one rushed in immediately. They already knew. When aides finally opened the door, they found Adolf Hitler slumped on a sofa, blood on his temple. Eva Braun lay beside him, peaceful, poison having done its work. The man who once commanded the fate of continents was dead in a cramped room without sunlight. But even death was not the end of Hitler's fear. His body was carried upstairs into the ruined garden of the Reich Chancellery. Soviet shells continued to fall nearby. Under those explosions, fuel was poured over the corpses. They were set on fire. Flames flickered, struggled, and burned. The remains were buried hastily in a shell crater. No grave, no monument, no legacy of honor, just ashes. Inside the bunker, panic spread. Some officers tried to escape, others chose suicide. Joseph Goebbels would poison his own children the next day before killing himself. The Nazi leadership disintegrated within hours. Berlin officially surrendered on May 2nd. Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 7th. The war in Europe was over. But Hitler's final 24 hours echo far beyond the bunker walls. They expose the truth behind absolute power. This was not a heroic last stand. It was not martyrdom. It was desperation. A man unable to face justice, unable to admit failure, choosing control over conscience to the very end. The bunker became the perfect metaphor for dictatorship. Isolated, cut off from reality, surrounded by lies, and finally collapsing under its own weight. For years, rumors spread. Some claimed Hitler escaped. Others believed he lived in exile. But the truth is far simpler and far darker. Hitler didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't repent. He hid underground and ended his life when there was nothing left to command. History remembers this not as an ending of one man, but as a warning to the world. When power is built on hatred, when truth is replaced by ideology, when leaders surround themselves with fear instead of honesty, collapse is inevitable. Hitler's final 24 hours were not the fall of a monster alone. They were the final chapter of an idea that promised greatness and delivered destruction. And when the bunker doors finally closed forever, the ruins above began something fragile and painful, a future without him. Not victory, not glory, just silence after 12 years of catastrophe.